what matters most today, in 10 years and 20 years, is that you build a known and trusted brand. Those are principles that are not going to go away. Platforms come and go, like Google, like Facebook, like LinkedIn, but principles are built to last.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. I'm Ed Marsh, excited to welcome you back to this episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. On today's episode, we're going to take a journey through the brief but convoluted history of content marketing, from the novelty era through the no-brainer period to where we are now, which is, is it worth doing anymore with AI? And to help take us on that journey and to help us anticipate what's next, I think that's an important part of this. I'm really excited to have Marcus Sheridan in the studio. Marcus is a name you probably know. He's a globally recognized communication expert. He's a best-selling author. He's a captivating keynote speaker. He speaks all over the world. His expertise spans the topics of sales, leadership, marketing, AI, personal development, trust. That's what his bio says. I'd add video. I'd add human nature. I'd certainly add saltwater fishing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Starting after college, Marcus founded a business that grew into the world's most trafficked swimming pool company. If you know his story, we're not going to spend a ton of time on that chapter, but you'll hear a little bit more about how it wasn't smooth sailing all the way through. He revolutionized effective communication in the business landscape, and he ignited the They Ask, You Answer movement, which empowers business to embrace transparency to help facilitate their marketing and communications. His book, They Ask, You Answer, has been published a couple editions and now updated as Endless Customers. Together, they've sold over 100,000 copies. So thank you to the audience for tuning in. Please do your part by giving the episode some social love. And Marcus, thank you so much for visiting with us today.
It's a great day to have a conversation with Ed Marsh. Let's do it. Lots happening in the world, Ed. Lots happening.
There is. It's a crazy world, but we're not here to try to boil the ocean to talk about all of the craziness that's going on. We're here to help people focus on what they need to be thinking about. All right. So we're going to take this full journey, Marcus. But first, I got to tackle a question head on right up front. The industrial manufacturing space often says, hey, that makes sense for software companies or for B2C or selling washing machines or kitchen appliances or swimming pools or whatever. But, and here it comes, our industry is different. Do we really need to end our conversation right here? Is it different, or does this actually apply?
Well, it's interesting. With my job, I get to travel around the world. I speak to audiences, really diverse audiences, which means many unique businesses, B2B, B2C, big, small, local, national, service product, you name it. What's fascinating to me, Ed, is the businesses that are not extraordinary in terms of the way they innovate from a sales and marketing perspective are the very ones saying, that doesn't apply to us.
That's almost like the acid test.
It's outrageously consistent. Because what happens is they hear something new and they immediately put themselves in this, special snowflake category. And they say, but yeah, that wouldn't work for our buyer. That wouldn't work for our business. That wouldn't work for our process. That wouldn't work for our industry. Ultimately, you can find any word to fill in that blank.
Sure.
And then what that does, it eliminates you from thinking innovatively, which I think there's a major need for innovation right now in order to stand out. And, when you look at this manufacturing space. Now, you mentioned I had a pool company. Still am it's one of the companies that I own today as a proprietor, but we sold the manufacturing side of the business in 2020. But we got to the point where we were building over 1,500 fiberglass pool shells in our facility. We were a B to C company, right? Which some of your listeners are, some are not, but that's what we were, right? Because we would sell to a dealer,
Right.
who would then sell to a homeowner in our case. And every single thing that I've ever taught, when it comes to the principles of trust and building a brand and becoming more known and more trusted in the market, 100% applied to that particular business, to River Pools Manufacturing. And so does every company have unique elements? Yes. But in terms of the way people buy, you're not special. And the psychology of the buyer is the same across the board. It just, sometimes there's more decision makers, or sometimes the value of the thing might be higher, but notwithstanding, for the most part, it's all the same stuff.
Right.
And that's hard for people to hear because we do want to feel special ed, but that's the truth.
Right. Yeah, I saw you recently on the Blackline Media podcast with Joshua Malott. Obviously, that's speaking to tradespeople. It's not exactly industrial manufacturing, but clearly reaching across well beyond the B2C space, where I think many of your initial anecdotes had people kind of compartmentalize you. Yeah, you mentioned traveling around the world, speaking at different associations. What would you say are some of the most characteristically industrial trade associations that you've spoken to?
Gosh, man, that's what I'd have to, everything is, for me at this point, everything is a bit of like a blur in terms of, because I've done like close to 1,000, probably 1,000 gigs.
Wow.
And it's, man, I can't.
All right. How about particularly wild locations? Anywhere that you needed security when you went there to give a presentation?
Well, I've spoken in South Africa. I've spoken all over Europe, and I've spoken in India. I've spoken in China. I've gone to these different places and had many different, like I said, just so many different types of businesses that were in the room. It's been fast, just incredible, the journey. But through this, I have gotten to understand the way people think very, very clearly. I just understand what makes people want to resist. And one of the most human characteristics is this resistance to change. And over the course of me really being a business owner now for 25 years, my 25th year as a business owner, and really thinking about, talking about business, I've never seen change like this. I mean, it's not even close.
Does that mean you also haven't seen resistance as strong as this?
Well, I think there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth right now, because folks are afraid to lose their identity, right? A lot of people's identities are wrapped up in what they do.
Right.
And because they feel a threat to that, there's this high sense of agitation. And people were already agitated, from the COVID experience. The agitation grew as a whole in society. AI is really stimulating that agitation. I don't blame AI. I blame people for that. But you just got folks that are sitting there thinking I could be replaced, and of course it's happening in the manufacturing place as well. Right? It's in terms of most folks have no concept as to the impact robotics is going to have, and humanoids are going to have. And a lot of folks don't even want to talk about that, right? It's like, all right, I'm okay if I'm watching, The Matrix or Terminator, but I don't necessarily want to talk about any of this stuff. And I think it's your fiduciary, it's your responsibility as a business person, as a leader, as a provider, probably for, whatever family you might have, to at least look at the world and say, okay, here's where it is. Here's where the opportunities are. And I do think it's a tremendous, tremendous time of opportunity as well. Opportunity really arises when there's resistance.
For people who are willing to embrace it.
That's correct. That's correct. So it's like, opportunity gets really high when resistance gets really high for something. And that's exactly what we're seeing with technology and with AI right now.
Well, one of the elements of your story, when you stumbled into the pool business, and then you essentially became, I would say, the living, breathing epitome of inbound marketing, with a wonderful success story and told in a very appealing and kind of approachable way. But fundamental to that story was kind of this hero's journey. Your back was against the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was early in the internet years. You could make a modest amount of good content and pretty quickly make some real impact on SEO and search rankings. Many of the folks that are listening right now don't necessarily feel like they're facing an existential crisis. And so I guess the question is, if you don't feel like your back is against the wall and you're not at that point in what you call the pride cycle and endless customers, how do we get people to change when the threat feels so ephemeral?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Well, let's talk about that pride cycle for a second. If you look at the history of the world, there's a pattern that humans, certainly civilizations, countries, cultures, follow that leads to prosperity and pain. It happens on an individual level, and it certainly happens on a collective level. So hypothetically, what happens is you're in a place of pain. Could be individually, or let's say as a business, again, or as a society, right? It doesn't matter.
Hard times make strong men, but good times,
right.
etc.
That's right. And so because you're in a place of pain, you're like, all right, I need to get out of this pain. And so you start doing these, what we would call the little things, the habits that lead to success.
You staying up at 11 at night at a kitchen table writing blog posts.
Correct. Maybe it's making the extra phone call. Maybe it's running the extra mile. Whatever that thing is.
Making the video when you don't think you like being on video, all that kind of stuff.
Correct. So you're doing all these little things that normally you would say, oh, they're uncomfortable. I don't want to do them, but you're relating more discomfort to the pain and staying where you are than to the discomfort of change. And so you start to do the little things, and because you do that, you start to get momentum. Because you start to get momentum, things start coming, falling your way, and suddenly you get to the top of this circle, which would be
good
prosperity.
Times make weak men.
That's right, prosperity. And as you experience prosperity, you're like, wow, this is great. This is good. Maybe I don't need to make that extra call. Maybe I don't need to run that extra mile. Maybe I don't need to have that one-on-one. Maybe I don't, need to, whatever, watch my diet. It's just a million things, right? And then suddenly, because you stop doing the little things, before you even know it, you slide back down to pain.
Right.
And that happens over and over and over again. That's called the pride cycle. And it really happens a lot in business. So, for example, what we're seeing right now is COVID for certain industries was quite the rainbow, right? And everything to do with home improvement benefited. So the manufacturers that were in the home improvement space benefited. The home improvement businesses, the traditional ones, landscapers, remodelers, all these, they just crushed it. Pool companies like mine just crushed it during COVID. And then boating companies, RV companies, etc. And then 3 years later, suddenly everybody's saying, whoa, there's a slowdown. And it's funny. I'm really tapped into marine. I'm tapped into a lot of the manufacturers. I do a ton within the marine space. They all said, we thought last year was going to be the bottom. But it seems like this year might be the bottom. And a lot of the dealerships, they're not prepared for what is happening right now in terms of the slowdown, because they weren't planting the seed when the harvest was available to them. Right. A lot of folks, what happens is, and this relates very much to the law of the harvest, but what happens is you're you're saying, oh my goodness, we got more crops than we could ever imagine. And so you put all your workers just harvesting the crops, and you forget that there's this other field over there that you still need to plant and seed and nourish.
Right.
And if you don't do that, once you get through the harvest, well, then you're not going to have anything for a season. And that's where a lot of companies are right now, from a sales and marketing standpoint, especially. When you look at content marketing and this idea of building a known and trusted brand, especially with content, that is the ultimate example of the law of the harvest, because it doesn't happen in a day.
Right.
You don't just suddenly throw money at the problem and boom, things are better. Like, you potentially can do that with, let's say, Google Ads, let's say, right? You could throw a bunch of money and you might start to get leads immediately, and that might help, for a period of time. But when it comes to building a known and trusted brand, that doesn't happen overnight. And from a marketing perspective, you need to be willing to do things that don't allow you to reap the harvest today. And that's why most companies will choose not to do it. Most companies are like,
they do it very briefly and then they quit, kind of like the diet.
That's right. That's exactly right. I probably should do video, but I just again, they relate too much pain to the idea of the long-term doing of the thing than they do to staying where they are.
And then they justify it away. I'm worried about supply chain, or I got to spend all my time trying to find talent, or whatever the case may be.
Correct. And that's very easy to do within the industrial manufacturing space. We love to blame recruiting or lack thereof. And we love to blame supply chain for our lack of innovation and our lack of not planting the seed when it comes to things like marketing. And that is just, once again, listen, I know it's easier said than done. I mean, as a manufacturer during COVID, I was doing everything under the sun that I could do, our company was, in order to get resin for our fiberglass. And we were, trying to, we were talking to freaking suppliers, everywhere from China to Mexico. I mean, we were doing anything we could possibly do to see anyone that could help us fulfill the needs that were coming our way from a sales perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get it, man. I get it. But that doesn't give you a pass to just completely drop the ball, because that's when the pride cycle hits. And that's when you find yourself like, how did we get back here? Things were so great a couple years ago.
Right.
What the heck happened? Well, what happened was you weren't planting the seed in the field.
But the other thing that I see in the industrial manufacturing space particularly is that, yes, they were really great a couple of years ago, but they weren't great because of what you were doing. They were great because all you had to do was answer the phone during COVID. It wasn't because you were marketing. It wasn't because you could sell worth a darn. It just happened to you.
It's kind of like I was telling the salespeople during COVID that were in that world of anything to do with home improvement. I'm like, what you're experiencing right now isn't real.
Right.
This is not real.
Right.
The day will come when you'll actually have to sell again. And when that day comes, if you're not prepared for it, it's going to hit you in the face really hard.
Right.
It's shocking how many times I said that. Because there's one thing I do pretty decently, Ed, is see the trend line of the next few years when it comes to things like sales, marketing, and consumers. Man, I mean, I was told every audience that would listen multiple times, and so many have come to me and said, "You said it, but it just didn't land, didn't sink in until it hit us in the face."
Right.
That's pride cycle.
All right, you wrote They Ask You Answer, first published in 2017, and that really codified, not blowing smoke up your tail, but what I would say is your brilliant insights into a very simple methodology. Yeah. Figure out the questions that your buyers are asking and answer them, and do it publicly, and use content on your website. Has anyone ever had a fundamental disagreement with that premise?
Well, there have been lots of disagreements from people that haven't done it.
With the fundamental premise, or just we don't want to talk about pricing or some kind of a nitpicky point? Yeah.
So the biggest pushback on They Ask You Answer, and I appreciate what you said, and I look at it really like analytically too, as the author of the work. I can look at it and say, from a content marketing perspective, it was the easiest to understand content marketing book and search engine optimization book ever written,
Right.
in my opinion, just because anybody could read it and say, oh my goodness, this makes total sense. So what you're saying is I just need to obsess over my customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns. I need to be willing to address them online through text, video, etc. Yeah, I got it. I understand. Like, that's a beautiful thing when people can quickly, easily understand what is essentially a framework that leads to success. Now, the pushback comes, and this is prolific when it comes to things like B2B or services or manufacturing, when it comes to things like pricing. Because one of the number one questions anybody gets, and in fact, we talk about this and They Ask You Answer now in Endless Customers, is basically 5 subjects that buyers constantly research, you, me, all of us, that we want to gauge and feel like we have a sense for before we reach out to a company. And they are cost questions, problems or fear-based questions, like what could go wrong questions, comparison-based questions. We love to compare. Reviews. People love reviews, but they want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to reviews. And they want to know the best, most, top, things like that. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, best. Those are what we call the big 5. And that really runs the economy in terms of the way people are searching online, whether it's Google or whether it's AI. That's what they're really researching, especially when they're getting serious about buying something. There is significant resistance for the idea of talking about cost. There's significant resistance when it comes to the idea of talking about things like competitors. And I'm not talking about negatively. I'm just talking about, hey, listen, if you get the question, hey, how does your product compare to their product, your method versus their method? These are things that you should be addressing,
Right.
because you're addressing them in sales situations in person. Why would you not be addressing them online? Because
But you also, you
Yeah.
routinely make the point that you got to address them honestly. And where a competitor is better at something, you got to say that, because if you don't,
Even
you
so
lose
far as to
trust. And if
say-
you do, you build trust.
Yeah, even so far as to say who you are and who you're not a good fit for. Like, that's a really, really big one.
Right.
That I try to, espouse, and I know that it works. We've got the data on it. But companies are just, what happens is they hear something like cost, and there's already been a group of people that have been listening to this, and they're shaking their head. Like, he just doesn't understand. He's, sure, he's been in manufacturing, but he's not been in my manufacturing. And that's not the way that it's done in our space.
Right.
And the problem is when they hear pricing, they immediately put themselves in this corner of, I have to put our exact pricing on our website, and that's all I'm doing. That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is this. When someone enters the buyer's journey, this is a B2B thing, B2C, same thing. When they enter the buyer's journey, there is a question that acts as the gatekeeper to the buyer's journey. It's the gate that people pass through to say, okay, so once they know the problem, they got to pass through the gate. What's the gate? The gate is roughly how much is this going to cost? That's the gate. When someone gets through that gate, then they do the rest of their research. Eventually, they reach out to companies, etc. Right? That's B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. Okay, wholesalers, suppliers, doesn't matter. And so, unless you take the time to address this, you cannot win the trust of the buyer, period.
But
What it means is
you
have to be willing to talk about things like, what drives the cost up? What drives the cost down? Why are some manufacturers more expensive? Why are some manufacturers less expensive? Roughly, where do we fall? That's just an example. You know how many manufacturers I've talked to that said, it's just so frustrating. We're just losing to China because their prices are so much better. And I always ask the same thing. So are their products better? Well, no, of course they're not better. Have you been explicit about that and really explain the difference online? Well, no, we don't want to mention the competitor. Why the heck not?
Right.
You get asked about it in person.
Right.
You've explained it to people before. You've explained side-by-sides that people showed to you, proposals that they had gotten. And you're telling me you're not willing to address this online? Sure, just kiss the business goodbye. Say, you know what? Unless you're willing to talk to me by phone, I'm not going to give you anything. How ridiculous is that?
Right.
And that's not how, if you're listening to this, that's not how you want to buy. That's not how you want to do your research. You want to be given as much as possible so as to get confident, comfortable, informed. And then you say, you know what? I think I'm ready to reach out. That's how it works. That's how you have evolved over the course of the last roughly 25 years that you and I have been using this thing called the internet.
I think a lot of people see the alternatives as being neutral. We don't publish pricing or we're like everyone else, or we take this risk and publish pricing. And I think you've made the point over the years and really put a fine point on it in Endless Customers that those aren't the two ends of the continuum. The other end of the continuum is you lose trust, you sound like everyone else, you've got no differentiation, you're not a particularly appealing to company to work with. It's not neutral, it's negative if you refuse to do this. And it's increasingly table stakes to agree to do it.
Yeah, a great point, Ed, because especially with AI, it's going to get even more prominent. You should have a great pricing video online that explains your industry and explains why some companies are more and why companies are less expensive. You should have that. You should have a very robust written piece of content that explains the same thing. You should have, I would argue, what's called a pricing estimator. And a pricing estimator is a simple tool that allows someone to come to your website and get a very quick sense for roughly how much this is going to cost through an interactive experience. And, this is wild because I started a company last year called PriceGuide.ai. Price Guide. Price Guide allows organizations to quickly, easily, and cost effectively build pricing estimators and add them to their website in less than 30 minutes. And generally, the outcome is 300 to 500% increase in leads. Wow. We see it over and over again, 300 to 500% increase. So in other words, if you are getting 5 leads a week on your website right now, if you put a pricing estimator on there that gave folks a general price range, that's the key phrase, an estimate, not a quote even, it's an estimate as to what they might spend based on what they inputted, well then, you're going to get 3 to 5x the number of leads. So if you're getting 5 right now, you're going to get 15 to 25 by adding a tool like this. Now in the future, what's going to happen is, and this again, for a lot of people listening to this, they're going to be like, I don't believe that's going to happen. Fine. You can say that, but I'm okay if you reach out to me in a few years and say, Marcus, you were right. Because I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is you and I are going to have these things. We might call them AI assistants. We might call them buying assistants. Probably will have a different name. But how it's going to work is you hypothetically might say, I want a swimming pool. And I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and you say to your AI assistant, hey, AI assistant, I want you to go online and I want you to research all the local swimming pool companies for me. I want you to choose the best one based on the following parameters that I'm interested in. And also, I want you to come back with 3 estimates as to what we would roughly spend with those companies. And then the AI goes and it comes back to you and it says, okay, so here's your full report. Here's what I found. This is like a real life buying assistant. Okay?
Exactly. It's not a search engine anymore. It's somebody, it's an assistant that you give a project to and say, bring me back the full answer.
And the assistant will say, I vetted 50 local swimming pool companies. Based on your parameters, 20 of them fit your parameters. Based on the reviews, reputation, and content I saw on their website, I singled down, I brought that to 6 companies that I thought might be the perfect fit. Of those 6, 3 of them had a pricing estimator on their website. Here are those 3 companies. Right. Here's the estimate that I got from each. And would you like to know which one I would recommend and why? Now, that's going to happen. And for some, that sounds far-fetched. And for some, they're like, oh, that makes sense. But it's going to happen for all of us because it's going to be easier and it's going to be possible. So if something is possible and if something is easier, in other words, it removes friction for us as humans, we're going to do it.
Sure.
That's how it's going to work every single time. We're going to choose the path of least resistance to be able to get the outcome that we would like to have. It's no different than when people say to me, I don't want to talk to AI for customer experience. I want to talk to a human. I'm like, actually, that's not true at all. What you want is you want your need addressed as quickly as possible. And whoever can do that, whatever can do that,
Right.
that's what you're going to choose. It's no different than if you had a problem with your, you're in the airport, your flight goes down, and would you rather talk to a human in that moment that may or may not be in a good mood, that you may or may not fully understand, that may or may not be able to pick up this second? Or would you rather talk to an AI that could pick up this second, is going to be very courteous, it's going to sound very nice, its only job is to help you, and because it's AI, it actually can look at data and give you answers much, much faster in terms of potential flights that you could take and alternatives. Which would you prefer? You're going to choose the AI.
Sure.
Period. If it could do those things. Now, that becomes the issue at hand is, okay, when can it do those things? But once it can do those things, that's what you're going to choose. It's just like you're not choosing today to put in a cassette into a cassette player and then hit the rewind button. You're not choosing a CD because you have to grab the CD and place it in the thing. You're choosing a faster, easier way of getting your music. It's all the same thing. There's a reason why everybody that has like eyes to see and nose to smell prefers an Uber over a taxi. There's a reason for that. Because you have more choice and you have more control. And you want choice. You want control. You don't like doubt. You don't like friction. You don't like to know what's not knowing what's on the other end. What's the car going to look like when it gets here? Is it going to, is it going to be an old crusty thing? Is it going to smell really bad? Is the person going to be, the type that, am I going to even be able to ask them, where to go? You don't want to worry about these things.
Right.
That's every business. That's industrial manufacturing. I do not care what the person is in. They're not the exception to what we're talking about right now, Ed. And I'm passionate about this because it's true, and I don't want your listeners to fail because I've experienced what it's like to look over the edge of bankruptcy, and it's very scary. It's very hard, and it's not very fun. Right. And so if we can remove ourselves from that and stay in that place of prosperity and not let the pride cycle bite us in the rear, man, that's such a better way to live.
All right. So the first version of They Ask You Answer in 2017, revised version in 2019, you started to lean into video, and then you paused. You went 6 years. And now, instead of an updated version of They Ask You Answer, you've published Endless Customers. Obviously, a lot of the same principles in it, but you decided specifically against just a new edition. How come?
A couple of reasons. One, and this might be interesting to you. I don't know how interesting it would be to the listeners, but I learned the psychology of book titles. And there are book titles that work better than others. There's a test that you can do. I learned this from Rory Vaden, Vaden, and I call it the I want, I wish test, which is ideally before the title of the book, you can say I want or I wish. So for example, I wish I could have Atomic Habits. I want a 4-hour work week. I wish I could win friends and influence people. Okay. Now, They Ask You Answer was a great book. But the mistake that a lot of authors make, this one included, is that they tend to name the thing the methodology, the how, and not the payoff of the thing.
Right.
And so nobody ever said, I want They Ask You Answer, unless they heard it from someone. Hey, you need this book, They Ask You Answer, unless they heard me speak about it. So the book did great for referrals. The book did great for my audiences, but it didn't do well by itself with an ignorant consumer. Whereas someone can walk by Endless Customers and say, Endless Customers, man, I've been struggling. to find new customers recently. I want that.
Right.
And that stops them. And that's the difference. And now it's, yes, I wish. That's the reason for the new name.
Got it.
And it was a good time for it because AI was going to be such a prevalent part to it. And when AI came out, ChatGPT in November 2022, I mean, immediately like that day, I started having people message me saying, what does this mean for content marketing? What does this mean for websites? What does this mean for They Ask You Answer?
So you talked about AI, some of the changes. You talked about how there will be AI buying agents. Will the 2017 model still work in some version? You know, the SEO research, the blog article, the CTA, the landing page with the form, downloadable PDF, sequence of nurturing emails. Is there any place for that fundamental model going forward? Or
I think the model that still very much exists is the obsession over your customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns.
Okay.
The big five is as important today as it's ever been in terms of what people are researching and what they want to know. The difference, though, is that when you talk about those things, you need to do it, for lack of a better phrase, in an omnipresent way. In other words, you need to do it across multiple platforms. You know, when I did River Pools, They Ask You Answer for River Pools, I just did a whole bunch of content on our website,
right,
and some YouTube videos, and we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world from
right.
that, and just changed the whole industry. I couldn't do that today. It wouldn't work the same. You know, if I'm going to change an entire industry today, I need to think more like Mr. Beast. You know what I mean? I need to be more like a media company. And a media company says, okay, I'm going to be obsessed about video. I'm going to show, and by the way, I think manufacturers are so, like, video is such a massive opportunity for anything to do with manufacturers. Most still are just, underbuying it so bad. I mean, come on.
I did a LinkedIn post probably 2 months ago where I said, if I was a private equity company and I bought a platform manufacturer and I started to look for bolt-ons, my next bolt-on would be some sort of a media company in the industry. Bolt that on and then begin to add the other manufacturers.
And that is such a smart recommendation. Yes. And will they do it? No. Right. And it's so frustrating because the opportunity is so there. When we started manufacturing, we started going hard into video. We were the first fiberglass pool manufacturer in the world that did a complete series on how we build our pools. It was 8 videos, averaged 10 minutes long each. It was about 80 minutes of content. I mean, and you could watch this, Ed, and you could start your own fiberglass pool manufacturing shop by watching this. It was that detailed. And I was just, it was funny. I was getting calls from other manufacturers like, what are you doing showing this? It's like the secret sauce here. I'm like, you're thinking it's secret sauce. The whole world knows it's Thousand Island dressing. I am not going to sit here and act like this is something special. But the fact that we showed it was wild because suddenly I would get pool builders would reach out and say, yeah, I got this homeowner here. And they say the only manufacturer they want to buy from is River Pools because you're the only ones that show how you make your pools. I don't carry your product yet. How do I become a dealer?
Wow.
So we became the fastest growing manufacturer literally in the world without sales reps because the homeowners, the end user, was saying, this is who I want.
But that was not a zero.
But I'm going to get that product.
But that wasn't a zero-click world, as you said. So today is different.
Now, today, it's very, very much evolved. 60% of all Google searches end in no click at all, which is wild. The blue link doesn't have the power that it used to. The blue link is that search result.
I think Sparktoro says only 28% of all searches result in an organic link click.
Yeah. Yeah. And the list goes on. Being number one in Google search results. 5 years ago, you might get 75, 80% of the clicks. Today, you'll probably get less than 20% of the clicks. If you're number one. So you could have the best SEO in the world and you could be gaining keywords and still losing traffic right now.
Right.
Which means you're losing leads, which means, that's a problem. You cannot build your house on Google alone. And if you build your house on Google, you're asking yourself to have major problems. What this means is for 20-ish years, the two fundamental entities that had to recommend us to be successful was the buyer, the human, and the search engine. And today, there's a third, and that third is becoming and will be the most important, which is the AI recommendation.
So how do we signal AI relevance in our content?
Yeah, well, we call it trust signals. That's what I call it, trust signals. And that's how AI determines whether or not they show you. And what's interesting is they've done some studies on this. It's like, I just saw it yesterday. I think it was the results that you get in ChatGPT match Google search engine results roughly 12% of the time. They're not eating from the same trough, which is really interesting. Okay. They've got different algorithms. Saw that? Huh? What's that?
Do you remember where you saw that research?
Yeah, it was, man, I was talking to, it was somebody that is very in tune with this, and I need to source it. So forgive me for not having the source, but we were talking about this. I'm like, son of a gun.
Yep.
So I'm going to get back to you on that, Ed. Okay. But the point is you can get dramatically different results in the majority of your searches from, if you went to AI and said, who's the best manufacturer for X, Y, or Z, and then you went to Google and did the same thing. Right. Now you're going to see oftentimes very different results.
Wow.
So there's this thing called trust signals. Now the issue is, each platform right now, whether it's Claude or whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Perplexity or whatever you use, is using a different algorithm of trust signals, but trust signals are the key. A trust signal would be anything that indicates to an AI that this is a company, a brand that I want to recommend. So a very obvious one would be reviews, especially Google reviews. That's a major trust signal. Content on your website that is original, that leans into really clear answers, major trust signal. Having the right information in terms of things like your name, your address, your phone number, right, across different platforms. That's a trust signal. Having a robust social media presence, that's a signal. Everything somebody writes about you is a signal. Every piece of content you put out there right now, Ed is creating a signal to AI that says he is a trusted thought leader within this space here, right? Industrial manufacturing, right? So these are all signals. I am putting out a signal right now as well. So these are signals. And the idea is that you create as many of these trust signals as you possibly can, so as to become the most known and trusted brand in your market. And if you put out enough of these trust signals, AI will catch on and humans will catch on too. And, search engines like traditional Google will still, you'll still benefit from that as well.
Although that may not be as important to benefit from that because people aren't looking there. It's not getting the same kind of, you look at the data from HubSpot's blog. I think it's lost 80% of its key term rankings and 80% of its traffic in the last 12 months. And obviously HubSpot is growing. So it's not impairing their ability to execute as a business.
Yeah, correct. What it also means is your website is much less of a education, like a top of funnel education, and it becomes much more of a conversion tool.
Okay, but the top of funnel remains really important. And top of the funnel, you talked about somebody wanting to know pricing because first they want to know about, is it feasible? Of course, in order for them to make that judgment, we have to have helped educate them about how they make that value decision, what their problem is really costing them, because often people don't do that. So that's pre-awareness, that's top of the funnel. So if we can't do that through our website, then where are we doing that sort of top of the funnel work now?
Yeah, well, okay. So the cost one, that's why the traditional funnel is debatable in terms of how it shakes out with today's buyer's journey. But And one of the reasons why it's changing is because certain things are much more accurate with AI than others. For example, if you go to AI right now and you try to get educated on how much something costs, usually it's inaccurate. It's not very good. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Eventually, it's going to be very good. But right now, it's not very good. And so somebody might start off with AI and they say something like, what type of pool should I get? What are the differences in the types of pools? And they might do a cost research on that too, but they find, I don't know if this seems a little bit shaky. Then they'll come to somebody's website. And I can tell you this right now. If you have an actual estimator on your website, boom. I mean, they're going to immediately go to that and they're going to.
Well, let's back up though. How about cost of a pool or pool investment versus buying a timeshare? If the idea is to spend time together as a family, there's two different ways to do it. Or how about what's the impact of a pool on the valuation of my house and resale value? The kinds of things before somebody's worried about whether they want a kidney shape or fiberglass or vinyl or whatever, should I even be thinking about a pool?
I would still do that for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I would be very aggressive on YouTube with this. And YouTube is what's so interesting about this is I'm seeing a lot of companies say, because of AI, I'm seeing much less traffic to my website. I have not heard a single company say, because of AI, I'm getting less YouTube views.
You had a LinkedIn post saying exactly that I think a week ago or so.
Nobody's so this is why I've been telling folks, which for some it was shocking that I would say this, but there's a very strong argument that your YouTube page will be more important than your website in terms of your brand in the next 5 years.
And by brand, what we really mean is
of funnel, a lot of that overarching education you'll now want to do over there on YouTube, because that's the greatest chance for you to get found. It's still, the second most used search engine in the world. Still, right. I don't know how long that will be, but it is. And there's still a lot of opportunities for you to really dominate YouTube, especially if you're in industrial manufacturing. You can dominate within YouTube right now. Right now, if you said, we're going to become a media company, we're going to start to show everything, right? And so that's why that's very, very exciting. And that becomes one of your new major hubs. So what I see happening is top and middle of funnel for many people is going to become three things: AI recommendations, social media recommendations, YouTube recommendations. Those are really going to be the main three that we're using in 5 years. The fourth one would be just human recommendations, but oftentimes human, you're just going to get from social. You're going to, get in. The other funny thing about this is, and I don't want to get too far off here, but social media is really not social media anymore. It's recommendation media is all it really is, because TikTok changed everything. And so whereas before, it was all about who are your friends. Now, let's take X, for example. If I use X, there's two versions of X I can use. I can use the people I follow, and it gives me a stream for that. Or it shows me recommended for me. Now, which one do I enjoy more? The one that's recommended for me. That's the one that I'm drawn to because of the fact that it really understands what I'm interested in. It's a recommendation engine. It's not a social engine anymore.
Right.
Whenever now, because Facebook and Instagram Reels have become such a big deal, those are recommendation engines because they're just following the algorithm that we saw from TikTok in 2017 that changed the entire world of video. Right. This is why YouTube now has short form, vertical style content. But anybody that's in industrial manufacturing right now, your competitors are not doing, most of them are not doing YouTube. And I can guarantee you the very high majority are not doing YouTube Shorts. And if you were to lean into that, you would see an incredible brand growth and trust signal growth from that arena. So I would lean very, very hard. And at the same time, though, for your website, now you've got self-service tools, interactive tools that allow someone to take an action or get an answer that previously they would have had to have gotten by talking with a human.
Right.
An example of that, and I talk about these hard in the book, are self-pricing tools, like we've already talked about, an estimator, self-selection tools, which is like a recommendation tool. So for example, if someone is not sure of what type of product they need, which is
You talked about the roofing company.
Yes. Yeah. Then you could have a series. It's just like if you go to my pool website, it has a tool that says, you're not sure if you want a fiberglass, a vinyl, or concrete in-ground pool. Well, then take this interactive quiz and get an honest recommendation.
Right.
And we have people take that every day, and bam, it's like we tell people you should get concrete based on what you said. And we don't sell concrete. Yet we say it because it's more important to us to be honest and the trusted voice and to send out the trust signal than it is to nefariously convince someone that, fiberglass is the way when it's clearly not, because that's going to come out when they talk to a salesperson anyway. So let's just save everybody time. And I just believe in karma too. So that's the type of thing that you're going to see on your site. One of the things that you're going to see big time within manufacturing is self-configuration tools. In other words, some type of interactive process that allows someone to build the thing, whatever the thing is. This is going to be major. And and what's interesting is anything that's interactive like this increases what's known as the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy means the more time someone spends invested in something, the more they will attempt to make it pay off.
Right.
So it's one of the experiments that we've run, Ed, is we've seen that putting a salesperson selector tool on a website increases closing rates by over 50%. So in other words, if you go to a website and you say, I want to talk to a salesperson, and they give you one, versus you go to a website and you say, I'd like to talk to a salesperson, and they say, here's 7. Here's an image of each. Here's a bio of each. Here's a video of each. You choose who you want to work with. Closing rates explode because now you chose, and you're looking to find a reason to make that deal work out. It's really fascinating, the psychology there.
All right, we've danced around the book, Endless Customers. We need to really dig into that before we run out of time. Kindle wouldn't let me explore my notes because I highlighted more than 10%. So I had to go through my notes rather than print them out and look at them. But at a high level, we used to talk about brand. Now, I think you've used the word a number of times in this conversation, trust. Trust and familiarity is essentially the new brand. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's why the whole payoff of the Endless Customer System, and that's what it is, it's a system that you can follow, is that you become the most known and trusted brand in your market.
And we certainly have a trust deficit. And in fact, I think one of my biggest pet peeves right now is this term narrative. I hate the word narrative. Implicit in narrative is that we're trying to convince somebody of something. We're trying to weave this fantasy rather than just tell people honestly what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a massive trust deficit, which is why if you can very quickly say something, do something that makes someone flinch, almost drop their guard, drop their hands and say, what? I can't believe they just said that. I can't believe they did that. Right. If you come right out and you say, hey, listen, we might not be a good fit for you. We accept that right now. Well, suddenly you're like, what? I'm listening.
Yep.
I'm listening. Right. If you come right out and say, you know what? Nobody in the industry talks about cost and price. We think that's ridiculous because you have a right to know. Let's talk about it. You're like, okay, all ears.
And we think about
the
jolt effect and the research that Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna did and the impact of indecision and risk aversion and all of that. Sure. All of this is about just heading a lot of that off, talking about those things that we know are echoing in the back of people's heads, helping them deal with their concerns head on.
Yeah, that was a great book, by the way, The Jolt Effect. And if you want people's attention today, you do need to jolt them. You need to make them flinch. And the best way to do that is through some type of radical transparency and or some type of disruption.
All right. So speaking of disruption, speed round, the 4 pillars of Endless Customers. I'm going to hit you with each one. You give me a quick sentence. Say what others won't.
Yeah. Say what others won't just means the big 5, leaning into the subjects online that buyers want, but your competitors won't talk about.
Show what others won't.
This is meaning your immediate company, you're showing everything, especially that which your competitors aren't willing to show.
Sell in a way that others don't.
This means leaning into this idea that 75% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience, removing sales friction, and allowing things like estimators on your website.
And be more human.
This means you can use AI to be more human, but you have to show your face. You got to get from behind the camera, behind the desk, to in front of the camera. Put your team in front of the camera.
And abandon the corporate
speak. You'll be more human.
Is that fair? To abandon the corporate speak.
Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started there, Ed.
Is any of those four more important than another?
Oh, I don't think so. I think on that one, it would probably be a bit of a variability per business, but you put them together, you will become the most known and trusted brand in your market. And
then a fundamental engine for that we've touched on is video. And so to a large extent, video means YouTube, although video can also be on your site. It can be as part of a sales play in an email. It can happen in a variety of places, but you already went through them, the big five: cost and price, problems, versus and comparisons, reviews, and best in class. Is there any of those that's most important?
This does vary by industry.
Okay.
In industries where everybody wants to know pricing, but nobody talks about it, say non-e-commerce style stuff, that becomes the biggest. Whereas if you went to retail where most people can get pricing, what becomes the most important are reviews, comparisons, and/or best, right? In industries where there's a lot of fear, problems becomes the biggest one.
Okay.
People want to know, like, what could go wrong?
Makes sense.
You see what I'm saying?
Now, you suggest in the book that a company with as little as $5 million in revenue probably should have a 3 to 5 person internal marketing team, including a full-time videographer. I can tell you, manufacturers whose only marketing spend has traditionally been trade shows will push back and say, of course, that classic line, our industry is different. They're just not accustomed to spending on marketing. What's your answer to them?
Well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because what happens is you've devalued marketing because you've never invested in marketing. You haven't built that extraordinary brand outside of just delivering good work to your customers. So you don't know what's possible. Just like people in that space will say things like, well, we just don't get leads from the internet. Of course you don't, because your web presence sucks.
Right.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
If you put junk out there, you get junk in return. Whereas I bet you there are people in your space that are crushing it or doing much better online. Why? Because they're bringing something to the party, and therefore they're getting invited back. So this is one of those things where, again, you just got to be really, really careful. It's like you got to find a way today to stand out. What better way to stand out than to start thinking like a media company and showing what no one else in your space is showing with video?
Yep.
That is so exciting.
Yep.
Problem is a lot of manufacturers do the thing and they just take it for granted. It's the curse of knowledge. It's like, we see it all the time. Like, no, y'all, no.
Right.
Like I said, when I produced that series of videos on how to manufacture a fiberglass pool, it changed the whole industry, man. And I just saw the power behind it. But nobody has ever done that before. That was completely abnormal. That was weird. And now everybody's like, oh, that works. So we should probably show our secret sauce too. Yeah, genius. You probably should. And by the way, all this stuff we're talking about too is incredible for recruiting. Your brand story from a recruiting standpoint, if you want to attract the best people, we haven't even touched on that, but it's incredibly powerful for that. And so if you want to attract the best people to your team and the best customers, well, then video is going to be critical to that.
Right. You are enthusiastic in every discussion and talk and video. I would say that you're perhaps more enthusiastic in the saltwater fishing university. You've got, in less than 4 years, 87,000 subscribers, nearly 60 million views. I know from following you over the years that your family comes first, but what's second? Is it fishing or is it business?
I'm one of those guys that I want to do it all. I don't really believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration.
Okay.
I try to morph them all together. I've taken all my kids all over the world with me to different, places and different things, and it's been extraordinary. I think I'll always do that. I love fishing and I love starting businesses. I love growing stuff. And so it just made sense to me because I'm like, man, I want to fish the rest of my life. It's going to cost me a ton of money. Might as well be some type of business expense. You know what I mean? And create some cool adventures out of it.
Right.
And what it did too is it forced me to learn YouTube in a different way. With River Pools, I approached YouTube purely educationally. And with Saltwater Fishing University / Speechless Sport Fishing, because that's the brand, what I've learned through that, interestingly enough, Ed, is I thought if I caught big fish, that would be the best videos. The best videos show the struggle that we have in growing the business and the decisions that we have to make in order to just survive as business owners within that charter fishing, commercial bluefin fishing space.
Right.
Just the struggles, the most human elements are the things that resonate with people the most on the channel. That I did not anticipate, but it was a great lesson for me. It also taught me the power of short form video because I've done multiple short form videos there that have done in the millions. And so I've learned how to create short form video that gets massive amounts of views.
So is fishing stress management for you or an outlet, or is it just another business that you've got passion for?
I definitely think it is an outlet for me. Yeah. And I see it as a wonderful form of play, but I don't dread work though. I actually really love creating all the time, and my mind doesn't really slow down in that regard. So, I've got a lot of unique businesses, today. But that's what happens when you build a known brand. It's stuff just, like dominoes off of it. And the opportunities come, and I can't say that my personal brand really helped me to build the fishing stuff, because that's been its own unique challenge. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done was build that channel, but it's also been incredibly enlightening. I'm like, oh, this is kicking my teeth in. That's awesome. I love getting my butt kicked, really, because it is teaching me a lot. Sure, I've got 87,000 subscribers, but the company hasn't made money yet. So it's like I am.
But boats
like
are
that.
cheap. I mean, it's not expensive to.
It's a sport fishing boat. It's a hole in the water that you throw money in. But I knew that going in, and I said, what if I could ever turn a profit on this, instead of it just being a tax write-off?
Right.
But to me, that's part of the journey. It's like I'm not saying, I'm literally thinking I do stuff all the time that I know is going to be hard. I'm going to lose. I sang a solo in church last year because I'm not a very good singer. And I chose a very hard song because I wanted to fail at something. Now that sounds weird to people, but it was really like, that was really a powerful thing for me, because I go on stages today and I know I'm going to light the audience up. I wanted to find a stage where it would just eat me alive. So I said, I'm going to go sing a song in front of a group of people. And I wasn't very good. That's healthy.
The essence of saying what others won't say is about being unique. We've spoken about being unique. We've also spoken about manufacturers saying our industry is different. In the industrial space, there's real hesitance. That's part of the reason I love Adele Ravella's buyer persona methodology. And I actually recently did some buyer interviews for a client where one company said specifically, I mean, verbatim, I spent months researching this product. In the end, I talked to two companies. I went to a trade show. I visited them both in their booth, and I couldn't tell a single difference between the two. And in the end, they made the decision because of a completely unrelated logistics point. But imagine that when these companies have spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing to differentiate themselves, and nobody can tell the difference between them. How do you respond to that, and how does Endless Customer solve that?
Man, that's sad, dude. That's sad,
but it's a huge opportunity as well, like you say.
Yeah. Because if you're doing this the right way, especially if you're showing what others aren't going to show, immediately they're going to say, "There's just something about you guys. I love the way you do this. I love the way you show that. I love, the fact that you show your manufacturing process. I just feel more comfortable with it.
Right.
The fact that you show your people and how they train. Nobody does that. I just think it's so interesting. Thank you for showing that. The fact that you show like where you source your materials from and nobody else does. And I get to see the whole timeline. That is so fascinating to me. It's like, these are things that are just immediate differentiators. If you can't create differentiators, what do you got? You don't have a brand at that point.
But this technical feature is so much better than that technical feature, right?
Yeah. And this is the type of stuff that commoditizes.
Exactly.
A thing, right? And so how do you decommoditize? You got to have a story. You got to have a brand. You got to do what others aren't willing to do. Say what they're not willing to say, show what they're not willing to show, sell in a way that's very different than everyone else, and humanize as you go about doing that by showing your people much better than they do.
So speaking of selling in a way they don't sell, this is obviously not just about marketing, it's about sales too. Dave Curlin makes a point in his baseline selling book and methodology that the way we sell becomes a more important differentiator than what we sell. And I mean, you talk about understanding sales process. I mean, I think of you as a marketing guy, but you're clearer about the importance of sales process than a lot of salespeople I hear. And you even talk about the intersection. You talk about how salespeople need to use short one-to-one videos in their sales process. How do you see marketing and sales overlapping?
Well, they overlap more today than they ever have. Marketing is handling more the buyer's journey than it's ever done before. Sales should see themselves as a part of the marketing department. Marketing department should see themselves as part of sales. Right. There should be at least one weekly meeting between members, like at least one person each from sales and marketing. So they're on the same page. They're oftentimes way too siloed, which isn't healthy for the organization at all. Sales is the ones that is hearing the most questions from the buyer. And so therefore they should be going back to marketing and saying, "Hey, here's a question I'm starting to hear a lot. Let me help you produce a piece of content about that. Let's go pop out a video together. I'm happy to be a subject matter expert for that, whatever it is." Right. So that's a big part of it. Now, at the same time, just sales in general, to me, I have a sales and leadership communication company. I started last year. It took off. It's doing really, really well. We are obsessed with helping salespeople and leaders ask better questions, make deeper connections, and always know exactly what to say in the right moment with the right energy. Because lots of times they don't have the right energy and people don't realize how much that affects it. Right. One thing that's very, very clear with selling today is that most organizations no longer do sales training. They do sales meetings, but they don't do sales training.
Amen.
They look at the pipeline, but they don't talk about how they can say it better or show it better as a salesperson. They're not reviewing their calls like they should be.
There's no sales coaching. There's no role playing.
It's a disaster.
All there is this administrative pipeline review in most cases.
And that's I blame this on leadership because
of course
leaders have gotten to the point where they're afraid to put themselves in the spotlight in front of their team and fail during a role play. And so because of that, they don't ask their team to do these role plays. What people don't understand is when you don't do role plays as a sales team, it starts to permeate the entire organization. And then you do not have a culture of caring candor. And you don't give feedback when feedback is needed.
Not
because
only that,
nobody's got skin thick enough to handle it.
the most capable athletes in the world show up, whether it's batting practice in baseball or shoot around in basketball or skate around in hockey, whatever the case may be. They're there before the fans. They're practicing, even though they're the most capable people in the world. And the idea that somehow I'm a good enough salesperson that I don't have to practice anymore. I mean,
it's crazy. And they're watching game film.
Exactly.
At this point, because of AI, every salesperson, regardless of you're in the field or in the office or virtual, you have the ability now to record and analyze every sales conversation. And it's extraordinary.
That's where the jolt effect came from.
What's that?
That's where the jolt effect came from. During COVID, all of them started getting recorded, and suddenly these insights were available.
Yes. Yeah. And you realize, oh, we've kind of learned a few things. we've learned a few things now. And it's like all these powerful stats came from that, you know? Right. And so it's one of those things where I'm extremely passionate about it. Bottom line is, when it comes to sales, we are practicing on our customers when we should be practicing on ourselves. Amen. And I don't think that's acceptable.
What advice do you have to embrace the grind? There's a lot of work in doing this stuff. It's exciting for a couple of months. There's new gear, there's new people. You get a hit on YouTube or whatever, but then you're stuck with work. Do you ever get tired? And how do you encourage people to embrace the grind and gut it out?
Well, one thing I found is you need to have owners. If I talk to anybody that's listening to this right now, and I said to them, who owns payroll in your company? They would know a name. They would say it within seconds.
Yep.
Because it's that important. If I said, though, who owns video in your company right now? Most would hesitate. Many would not know who to say. And I don't think that's okay.
Right.
We have to start treating these things like it's religion, man. It's like, hey, this is what I do. Like payroll, I do it every Friday, do it at 3 p.m. And this is the person responsible for it. And if I don't do it, there's a revolt on my hands.
And if I feel sick, somebody else is going to do it. It's going to get done. It's non-negotiable.
I'm not going to cancel it. I'm not going to push it off. It's just, it's like everything else in life. It's about priorities.
Right.
And until you say, we're going to build a business that is built to last, that we're going to remove ourselves from this pride cycle, that we're going to find ourselves constantly in a place of prosperity, but act like we're in pain in terms of the actions we're taking. We're not going to get too conceited or arrogant, think that we've got this all figured out. We're always going to be looking to replace ourselves, our methodologies. We're not going to rest on our laurels. We're not going to say, well, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. All right. Famous quote, dumb quote, because that's what got Henry Ford in trouble. That's why they lost so much of the market. It sounds real nice in the moment, but it doesn't actually work when you stop listening to the marketplace and you refuse to innovate. Right. So the point being is, I actually don't get tired of this stuff. I love it. I'm as passionate today about creating things as I was, when I started in business 25 years ago, Ed.
That's great.
I think I feel like we should all count our lucky stars that we get to be alive right now. It's so great. And technology enables us to live longer. We're living more comfortably than we've ever lived. If you're offended by that statement, just get a time machine, go back in time, and let me know how that works out for you. Right? It's extraordinary what we have. Even if air conditioner is broken on your car, the fact that you can get in a vehicle and get where you want to go quickly and have the air blow in your face and you're not smelling the horse manure the whole time is a pretty extraordinary thing. And so we live in really fruitful, abundant times, and we have reason to be grateful for that. And there's reason to be, there's a perspective there that I think matters. I'm very excited about AI. I'm also level-headed enough to know that it's going to come with its challenges and it's going to be used, unfortunately, in nefarious ways. But it's also going to probably be the cure for cancer when push comes to shove. Right. And if any one of us right now would say, would you sacrifice your job today to cure cancer tomorrow? Anybody would stand up and say yes to that. And it's one of those things where I do believe that there's going to be job disruption, but I also believe that there's going to be abundance on the other side. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities. I think there's probably millions of jobs right now that don't currently exist, but they're around the corner and they will exist soon. Just like there's millions of jobs today that we have that did not exist 50 years ago.
Sure.
But, there was no such thing as a video game designer 50 years ago.
Right.
There was no such thing as a professional YouTuber 50 years ago. Now you got millions of these people right out there. It's just extraordinary how it all works and how it all comes together.
All right. People that have listened to you certainly are going to want more from you. Obviously, the first place to go is the book. I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll put your LinkedIn and show notes so people can follow you there. They can follow the Endless Customers podcast on the Impact channel. Where else should people go to connect with you and get more of your wisdom?
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. If you see it from me on LinkedIn, I wrote it. If you message me, I'll message you back if it's personalized. And you can find me at marcussheridan.com if you're ever interested in a speaker for your event and you do not want your audience to fall asleep. I promise they will not fall asleep if I'm there.
All right. I'll put those links all in the show notes. Out of curiosity, I mentioned the podcast. When you listen to podcasts or audiobooks, what speed do you listen at?
Usually just 1.1 or 1.2. I don't want to lose the soul of it. I am such a fan of communication skills. I don't want to lose the nuance of how they're communicating with me in that moment.
Got it. All right. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to run an executive reading group this summer. That'll be another opportunity for people to dig into the book further, particularly with some peers and get some different perspective on it. Look in the show notes. You'll see a variety of links for Marcus, including LinkedIn, where, as he said, you can get in touch with him, or through his Marcus Sheridan website if you're interested in a speaking gig. So with that, as we get ready to wrap up, Marcus, give us, say, 2 to 3 minutes on what every middle market industrial manufacturing owner or executive need to understand about marketing and sales today and for the next 3 years.
Well, obviously, this is going to sound redundant to some, but what matters most today, in 10 years and 20 years, is that you build a known and trusted brand. Those are principles that are not going to go away. Platforms come and go, like Google, like Facebook, like LinkedIn, but principles are built to last, and you want to build your business on principles. How can you become that known and trusted brand? You want to say what others aren't willing to say, show what others aren't willing to show, sell in ways others aren't willing to sell, and be more human than they're willing to be. One of the keys to this, though, is you've got to be willing to be different. You got to be willing to disrupt. If no one has done it before, that's a good thing. That's a good sign. And so run in that direction as quickly as you can. Don't sleep on AI. Get in the sandbox now.
Right.
That's your fiduciary. That is a must. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. The marketplace doesn't care about our opinions.
Right.
The marketplace is going to do what the marketplace does. So we can't allow our personal opinions to screw up smart business decisions. And so get in the sandbox, get your team in the sandbox, make sure you have an AI champion within your company right now that's updating you, and maybe you can even be that champion. Get someone to own video, start showing things that no one has ever shown before, and be aware of the pride cycle. See where you are in that circle right now. Have you stopped doing the little things because you've been fat and happy? Or are you in a place where you need to start doing the little things because you're in pain? And I would urge you to never leave that place of doing the little things, because that's how you sustain long-term results. That's how you can build an extraordinary brand that withstands the test of time.
Beautiful. Fabulous conversation, Marcus. Thank you for spending time visiting today and for the enormous gift that you've given every business with your insights, not only in this conversation today, but through your books and through your speeches and just by elevating this conversation the way you have over the years.
My pleasure, Ed. Love chatting with you, buddy.
That's nice of you to say. All right. So Marcus has done his part. Now, everyone listening, it's time for you to do yours. You have to like and comment on the episodes. I'll read them. I'll reply to them. Share it with colleagues who need to hear this. And by all means, please subscribe. Thank you so much for listening to the Industrial Growth Institute podcast.